Hello. Nice to see
Hello.
everyone.
Nice to see you all. Nice to see Amy as well. I mean,
Mhm.
we get to see each other a lot, which is part of the joy of my week every week.
I
But
know.
it's
Same
great
here.
to great. I look forward to these power ups. It's a power up for ourselves and the power up, hopefully, for everyone out there. You get your
Mhm.
little 15-minute boost.
Yeah, for sure. And we do these every Tuesday. So for people newcomers, we do this at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific time. And on Thursdays, we have a session where we take the theme for the week and then bring it to Clubhouse. So we have a Clubhouse room that's at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific time. So today, we're going to be talking about empathy deficit disorder. So last week we talked about the empathy deficit. There's actually this disorder that isn't in the main textbook for psychology, but there's a couple things I wanted to bring up: tell a story, and then read a passage from Empathy for Change. Before I get started, anything from you, Kevin?
I mean, I love starting with stories. So I am engaged. I am listening.
All
Let's
right,
hear it. And I'm excited.
let's do it. Okay, so last week I did a keynote at the .gov Design Conference, which is the AIGA organization, which is for designers. So I was doing the opening keynote. It was pretty intense and amazing at the same time, and I'm so glad I did this. And so I'm going to start with like the first part of the story that I talk about in there, and then later this week you'll get. I'm going to be starting a 6-part series that kind of goes into the main points that I made in the book. So let me get started. So in fall 2018, I was 2 months into an incredible opportunity to stand up a new IT modernization center of excellence around transformation. This was the big center of excellence work around a lot of technical things, but this one was around guiding agencies into designing what their organizations might look like in the 21st century. So 2 months into it, I went into a meeting with the White House director of the Office of American Innovation, and I wanted to understand what his vision was and to see where we can align our visions. And also, I wanted to share my thoughts on how we might be able to accomplish this task. And 5 minutes into that conversation, he cuts me off mid-sentence and he says, "You're thinking about everything wrong. You need to fit into what we're doing." And undeterred, I kind of continued on. I was a little shook by that phrase, but I kept going and I persevered. And but by the end of that discussion, he literally stated, like, point blank to me, he said, "You work for me and you work for this president." I was working in the White House as an entrepreneur in residence. I was meant to push boundaries, but I didn't think I was going to be going up against this boundary here. So that actually talks a lot about what we're talking about, empathy deficit disorder. And I'm going to read a passage from the book that kind of goes into a little bit more detail around this, and then we'll have a conversation. So here we go. So sadly, I walked away from this meeting dejected, unheard, and broken. This type of behavior was par for the course in my former workplace, with people taking projects and stabbing me in the back to get ahead. And this is talking about my former workplace prior to the White House. And leadership lacked empathy. This and many interactions at work and life got me thinking, how do we know when someone doesn't have empathy? How might we get people who lack empathy to actually care and be more empathetic? And also, does empathy work when it's one-sided? Can one person totally disarm negativity with a certain patience and mindfulness? Or does it take two to tango? Those who lack empathy. People who don't care about others find it difficult to step outside their world to consider the perspectives of other people, either through the lack of ability or interest. Usually you'll feel off when you're around a person who lacks empathy. They react to the emotions of a scenario rather than responding deliberately to a situation. They might jump at first into criticizing others without wondering someone else's perspective. They might have a cold or unfeeling demeanor, not caring for other people's suffering or the less fortunate. More subtle signs that someone lacks empathy is that they don't pick up on social cues in the room. They might talk about themselves too long or are boring everyone, but aren't aware of the fact. Oversharing about themselves, and they're not asking meaningful questions about other people. Or when you come to them with a problem that matters to you, they try to solve the problem without asking for advice or avoid the question or problems altogether, abandoning you. Have an over-the-top response to your issue or try to talk to you about the time that was worse for them. So they turn it to themselves. Minimize your emotions as not important or needed, or dismiss them and try to convince you to think positively. And don't answer the question directly, but talk about themselves. You're like sitting here like, what? It's wild.
No, you know why? Because everything in this, especially read by you, is powerful, but it brought me back to when I read this, and now to one of my closest friends in college, and how this was our relationship. Like, and I realize now that it was the empathy deficit disorder. Because anything I would bring up, it was everything you listed. I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Like reading it is one thing, like in a book, but then when it's said out loud, you're like, oh my goodness. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Because, one of the things that I think people said, I was in one of the trainings I was in was telling me recently, was the fact that, and pardon the thing outside, but one people were saying is like, listening is not when you just interject your own story, right? It's not saying you're not listening to somebody if you're just saying, oh, wait, that reminds me of something about me, right? Because you want to relate to people, but that's not really giving empathy. You want to hold the space for somebody. And I was like, I've definitely been like a person who does that because I want to relate so deeply to people, right? And it sounds like you have recognition with that too, right?
Yeah, what's great, and I think what we need to understand is that all these people, from their perspective, they're the hero of their story. They're coming from positive intent. We're not saying that they're bad people. I want that to be understood, because I don't believe they're bad people. People are heroes of their stories. I truly believe that people are based on their worldview and perspective are trying to be. But with this understanding, and I think it's really clear, is because they're unaware, or they are unable to understand how their actions or choices or words are impacting someone else, or are they creating space for someone else as well?
Yeah.
And I think what was so powerful, and you illustrated it so well in the book, is that this should be something that we should study more, and it should be something that, even though it's not in the psychology textbooks, is something that is a reality that we have all seen, and like I just had that friend moment, and you've had moments in your White House story, and people and people coming into workplaces when they say it's toxic. This is part of it. The manager is not trying to be toxic. The manager is not like, I'm going to be a toxic boss.
Oh, exactly. I think if we're assuming that everyone has the positive intent, we're trying to make it better, but it's still not working and still not changing, and I think that's really interesting. And this is actually something, this empathy deficit disorder, I don't want to take credit for it. I just want to point that out. I want to finish like these last few paragraphs to kind of talk about it, because I think it will illuminate a couple things. So I was like, so empathy deficit disorder, sound familiar? People who lack empathy suffer from empathy deficit disorder, which is not an actual diagnosis, but should be, according to Dr. Douglas LeBaire, a psychologist and the director of the Center of Progressive Development. People who suffer from EDD are unable to step outside of themselves and be in tune with what others are experiencing. They also are not in touch with their own mindset, biases, and struggles. EDD can lead to poor communication, conflicts, and hatred towards a specific group of people that does not fit into your world or life view. Important, right? As Dr. LeBaire says, EDD grows when people focus too much on acquiring power, status, and money for themselves. goes to narcissism, we were talking about before. This is alarming because we're increasingly moving towards these values as a country. The effects of EDD can be deep. EDD keeps a person locked inside a self-centered world, and that breeds emotional isolation, disconnection, and polarization. That's highly dangerous in today's interconnected global world. Dr. Libere says this is the death of empathy, a world where you rely on yourself more and are less connected to other people. Your sense of being part of the larger interwoven community, which is absolutely necessary for survival in today's world, fades away. And so does your awareness that we have to sink or swim together, help each other, and sustain the planet we inhabit, or else we're all in deep trouble.
Yes. And thank you. First of all, hi, Alex. Thanks for the comments. Love you. Sending love by your way. And John. Absolutely. And I think if you even connect this to evolutionary biology, and I think you do there, is that humans, we were all on our own and then we found strength in community. And that's how the civilization has evolved. And if we now go back and retreat into ourselves and say, no, take care of myself, I'm not going to care about anyone else, and that's it, and it's not about the community, we are starting to see the big problems of that as it's coming about. Mm-hmm. And where it's about ourselves. Oh, I only care about me or my family or whatever it is. I won't care. Like, think about all the politicians who said no against gay marriage, and then until their child came out to them, and then they changed their mind. And this is what that example where they couldn't put themselves in the other person's perspective until it happened to themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think about is like there's a disconnect. It's like a lot of times people talk about like until you're exposed to something, you don't really have empathy for something. But I think that in a way we can predispose ourselves to being open to people's experiences, right? Yeah. It's about curiosity. It's about caring about other people, humility, not thinking that you're better than somebody else that's out there. And, it just makes me think, like, just earlier this morning, I'm speaking on a panel next week at my alma mater at University of Maryland, and it's about cultural competence. And and it's like diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are the first time I'm meeting all of these people. We're like kind of brainstorming, but it's really storming in this group, right? Because we're all being pushed to put together and be like, what are we going to talk about? And, I think we had this shared understanding of each other and this deep empathy, but it felt like there was kind of tension right in the room. And at the end of the day, like, I think if we all like believe that, like, if we can lean into that more of like, we're a community, we're all going towards the same direction. Let's act as though we are in community with each other rather than against each other almost. That's something that I was deeply thinking about. So it happens all the time.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think all the items you listed, humility and all that, I think the one piece I would add to that is also believing in others' stories. Believe their stories. When someone is telling you their story, believe it, understand it, try to understand the motivation. And one of the other things I now have been doing more recently is, regardless of where you come from, your background, one thing that is fundamentally common amongst all of us is we're all trying to be happy and fulfilled. And so if I disagree with someone, I have a team in my job or whatever, I'm like, hey, we're all just trying to be happy and fulfilled, right? Yes. So we've started from a place of agreement. We're starting from the place of that. So those are some tools that I've brought in to and the ones you've shared are incredibly powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good place to end on today. I have so many things I want to say, but I know we're at the 15-minute mark and we want to give the time back in the day. Join us on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. West Coast time, Pacific time. And, we'll be posting later this week about joining it. So come to our Clubhouse, join our club on Clubhouse we're called Empathy for Change. And we'll be continuing about this topic, and we'd love to have you. And look for my blog post that come out later this week about that story, that continues out that story a little bit more about what was happening in that conversation. And we'd love to hear the comments, all the stuff. Love that people joined today and was asking all these things. So I love it. Thanks, Julia, for that EQ, emotional intelligence into the mix. So important. And so I'd love to have you come, Julia, Alex, and Jay. Oh my gosh, from my former workplace that I was talking about. Love to see you. Thank you for watching us and like being here with us. This is incredible. So love you all. See you soon. Bye.